sign this resignation letter, or we terminate you immediately." Those were the exact words. No preamble, no warning, no attempt to soften the impact. Just a flat ultimatum delivered across a polished mahogany table by people who had already decided my value had expired. After 21 years of dedicated service, I was given 30 minutes to decide whether my career would end quietly or violently. Resign, they said, or be terminated on the spot. The room was silent after that, the kind of silence that isn't empty but heavy, pressing down on your chest, daring you to panic. 4 executives sat across from me, hands folded, faces carefully arranged into expressions of rehearsed concern. They looked like judges, or maybe undertakers. I didn't speak right away, because when powerful people think they've cornered you, they stop paying attention. 5 days later, their corporate attorney called me at exactly 7:43 a.m. I remember the time because I'd just poured my first cup of coffee. The steam was still rising when my phone vibrated against the kitchen counter. Unknown number. Denver area code. I answered on the 4th ring. "Miss Vaughn," the voice said, tight and controlled, "we need to discuss the precise language in your resignation letter." That was the moment. I knew they'd finally read it. Logan Pierce, the CFO who'd smirked while offering me 3 weeks of severance, went completely silent later that morning when I explained what I actually meant. But to understand how a single sentence triggered corporate panic, lawsuits, and a 7-figure settlement, you need to go back. Back to the conference room. Back to the acquisition. Back to the mistake they didn't realize they were making. My name is Anna Vaughn. I'm 46 years old. For 21 years I worked at Ascent Systems, a software development company headquartered in Denver, Colorado. We specialized in enterprise resource planning solutions for manufacturing companies, the kind of software so deeply embedded into operations that removing it would be like pulling a nervous system out of a living body. I joined the company in July of 2004 as a junior operations analyst. I was fresh out of graduate school with an MBA from Colorado State University, earning $42,000 a year. I lived in a studio apartment where the heater rattled all night and the rent swallowed more than half my paycheck. I owned exactly 1 professional blazer, bought on clearance, and drove a car that stalled if I didn't let it warm up for 3 minutes every morning. But I worked, constantly. I learned systems no one else wanted to touch. I stayed late when things broke. I remembered details others forgot. By October 2025, my annual compensation had grown to $192,000, plus quarterly bonuses, full benefits, and stock options accumulated over 2 decades. I was the Senior Director of Global Operations. I managed 41 professionals across North America, Europe, and Southeast Asia. My division generated $63 million in annual revenue. Entire client relationships existed solely because I knew how to keep them functioning. But titles and numbers don't tell the real story. What mattered was this: I was institutional memory. When executives forgot why a client contract included a strange clause from 2009, my phone rang. When finance needed operational data from 2007 that no longer existed in current systems, they emailed me. When board members questioned why certain workflows even existed, I explained them, because I'd helped design them. My email archives went back 21 years. I maintained vendor relationships that predated most of current management. I remembered negotiations that happened before half the leadership team had even graduated college. For over 2 decades, I was the person people called when something critical broke, until suddenly, I wasn't. The warning signs began 8 months before that October confrontation. In February 2025, Ascent Systems was acquired by Dominion Corporate Holdings, a massive conglomerate valued at $11.4 billion. Dominion specialized in acquiring mid-sized technology firms, cutting costs aggressively, and replacing experienced employees with younger, cheaper labor. I had watched this exact strategy destroy 3 competitors in our industry over the previous 18 months. I knew what was coming the moment the acquisition was announced. The playbook never changes. First come the reassurances, stability, continuity, appreciation for talent, then come the restructurings, then the quiet eliminations. Anyone earning above a certain threshold becomes redundant. Anyone with long-term institutional knowledge becomes expensive. The acquisition finalized on February 14, 2025. Valentine's Day. I remember staring at the email announcement and laughing out loud. It felt almost cruelly symbolic. The new management team arrived on February 22nd. Our new CEO was Cameron Foster, 35 years old, Yale MBA, previously an executive at a startup that burned through $40 million in venture capital before collapsing in under 3 years. He spoke confidently, he dressed well, he had absolutely no understanding of enterprise software operations. The CFO was Logan Pierce, 33, formerly a consultant at Bain & Company, brilliant with spreadsheets and models, completely ignorant of how actual businesses function day to day. The COO was Levi Coleman, 37, a Dominion insider who believed 8 months managing a failed software company made him an authority on all things technology. On March 3rd, they scheduled a mandatory company-wide meeting. Cameron stood in our main conference room, the same room I'd personally designed when we relocated buildings in 2013. I selected the furniture, negotiated the equipment contracts, even chose the specific shade of gray on the walls. "We're incredibly excited about this partnership," he announced with polished enthusiasm. "Nothing fundamental is going to change." I'd heard those exact words before. That night, at 10:23 p.m., I opened my laptop and updated my resume. But I also started doing something else. Something my father taught me during his 32 years as a construction foreman fighting for workers' rights. I started documenting everything. Every email, every meeting, every comment about age, cost, or fresh perspectives. I backed it all up. 3 encrypted drives, stored separately. Because I knew one thing for certain. If they came for me, I would not be unprepared, and that preparation would soon change everything. The layoffs began quietly. No dramatic announcements. No company-wide emails using words like terminated or fired. Instead, calendar invites disappeared. Desks were cleared over lunch breaks. Security badges stopped working without explanation. On March 24, 2025, at exactly 8:47 a.m., the first wave hit. 15 employees were gone before noon. Every single one of them was over 42 years old. Every single one earned more than $115,000 a year. Every single one had decades of experience tied directly to Ascent's core systems. Human Resources called it organizational realignment. I called it what it was, a purge. Within 6 weeks, their replacements arrived. Recent graduates, polished resumes, bright smiles, starting salaries under $70,000. They were eager, compliant, and, most importantly, cheap. They had no idea what they'd walked into. I documented every termination, every replacement hire, every meeting where age, compensation, or legacy knowledge was mentioned. By April, the focus shifted toward me. At first, it was subtle enough that someone without long tenure might have missed it. Meetings I'd attended for years were suddenly restructured. Calendar invites vanished without explanation. A quarterly strategy session I had personally facilitated for 9 consecutive years was removed from my schedule on April 18th. When I asked Cameron about it directly, he smiled and said, "We're bringing fresh perspectives to the process. We appreciate your past contributions, though." Past contributions. On April 29th, 4 of my primary responsibilities were reassigned to Grayson, a 27-year-old manager with 9 months at the company and 0 familiarity with our legacy systems. I spent hours quietly correcting his mistakes so clients wouldn't notice. In May, the intimidation became public. During a department-wide meeting with my entire team present, Cameron questioned my decision-making. He implied, without evidence, that I was struggling to adapt to modern operational methodologies. No specifics, no examples, just doubt. It was designed to humiliate me, to undermine my authority, to make me quit. I didn't. I continued showing up every day. Calm, professional, precise. My personnel record was spotless. 21 years of outstanding evaluations, 0 disciplinary actions, multiple awards. They couldn't fire me for cause. And they knew it. So on June 27th, Logan tried a different approach. He called me into his office at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday. Friday meetings are never good news. "We're restructuring operations," he said, folding his hands. "Your current role is being eliminated." He slid a document across the desk. They were creating a new position, Senior Operations Coordinator, same responsibilities, different title, $94,000 salary, a $98,000 pay cut, textbook constructive dismissal. I smiled pleasantly and said I'd need time to consider it. Then I went home and called Elizabeth Hartman. Elizabeth had 28 years of experience in employment law. She specialized in cases exactly like mine. "Do not accept that," she said. "They're trying to force you out. Wait. Document. Let them make the next move." I waited. 38 days later, on August 4th at 3:15 p.m., Cameron's executive assistant emailed me. Conference room C. Immediate availability required. Conference room C. Not his office. That meant witnesses. That meant official business. That meant termination. I printed the letter I'd written weeks earlier, folded it once, slipped it into my jacket pocket. When I entered the room, Cameron, Logan, Levi, and Stephanie from HR were already seated on one side of the table. 4 portfolios, 4 pens, 4 identical expressions of rehearsed sympathy. 2 options: resign immediately and receive 3 weeks of severance, or be terminated and receive nothing. They slid a resignation letter toward me, pre-written, pre-approved, and designed to strip me of every legal right I had. I read it 3 times. Then I looked up. "I'll resign," I said calmly. Relief washed across their faces. "But I'll write my own letter." They hesitated, but they couldn't stop me without admitting coercion. At 4:17 p.m., I handed Cameron a single page. 1 sentence, 42 words. He skimmed it, accepted it, and that was the moment they sealed their fate. 5 days later, at 7:43 a.m., my phone rang, and everything they thought they'd won began to unravel. At 7:43 a.m., my phone vibrated against the kitchen counter. I remember the time because my coffee hadn't finished brewing. The house was still quiet, the early morning calm broken only by the low hum of the refrigerator. Unknown number. Denver area code. I answered on the 4th ring. "Miss Vaughn, this is Jonathan Winters, General Counsel for Dominion Corporate Holdings. We need to discuss your resignation letter." His voice was controlled, but I could hear the strain underneath it, the sound of a lawyer who had just discovered something he very much did not like. "Of course," I said. "How can I help you? There appears to be some confusion regarding the language you used, specifically the phrase effective upon receipt of complete settlement." There it was, the sentence they hadn't read carefully enough. I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet Elizabeth and I had prepared weeks earlier. 63 tabs, each one color-coded, each one backed by documentation. "There's no confusion," I said calmly. "My resignation is conditional. It becomes effective when I receive full settlement of all amounts owed to me under my employment agreement and applicable Colorado law." Silence. Papers shuffled on his end of the line. A muffled voice whispered urgently in the background. "I'm sorry," Jonathan said finally. "Can you repeat that?" "Until I'm paid in full," I replied. "My resignation hasn't taken effect." "Which means I'm still employed." The pause that followed was long enough to feel heavy. "And what?" he asked carefully. "Do you believe we owe you?" I began reading from my spreadsheet. Salary through the date of resignation, accrued vacation, 142.5 hours, outstanding expense reimbursements, then the bonus, then the stock options, then the severance triggered by change of control. By the time I finished, the total sat just under $1.7 million. "You're saying we owe you over $1.6 million, Jonathan said, his voice rising despite his effort to remain composed. "Plus statutory interest," I added. "And since I'm still technically employed, my salary continues to accrue daily." "This is absurd," he snapped. "We'll fight this." "You should," I said pleasantly. "Discovery will be fascinating." I explained what I had. Emails, recordings, text messages, evidence of systematic age discrimination, evidence of constructive dismissal, evidence of intent. The silence on the line told me everything. 3 hours and 42 minutes later, Logan, Pierce called. He wasn't calm. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted. "I resigned," I replied. "Exactly as you asked. You tricked us." "I wrote a legally valid resignation letter," I said. "You accepted it without reading." They threatened lawsuits. I welcomed them. By evening, my work email was mysteriously restored. By nightfall, 6 outside law firms had reviewed my letter. All 6 said the same thing. They were on the hook. The first settlement offer came in at $950,000. I declined. The second at $1.2 million. I declined again. At 8:47 p.m., Jonathan called back. Deal, he said. Full payment. Letter of recommendation. Mutual non-disparagement. On September 3, 2025, at 1:18 p.m., the wire transfer hit my account. $1,754,120.41. 3 days later, my resignation became effective. Cameron was fired 7 months after that. Logan quit. The company began losing clients. As for me, I consult now. I help others protect themselves. And I teach one lesson above all others. Know your rights, document everything, and never assume the people across the table are smarter than you, just because they wear better suits. Sometimes the best revenge isn't anger, it's precision.